You know, when the devs revealed the kit for Oraxia, originally I was a bit confused as to why her kit seemed to be pulling in multiple directions at once. One of that of stealth and invis, whilst the other leaning towards health and overall tankiness. It seemed like a counterintuitive kit, but I now realise the reason why they've made her the way she is because Oraxia is one of the most versatile Warframes in the game, and is intended to be so. Off the top of my head, I can't exactly think of a Warframe whose kit directly wants you to mod in different ways to fit your certain playstyle, but at the bare minimum, regardless of how you want to play this Warframe, you're probably going to have at least 3 different builds, all with different playstyles. In order to understand what the hell I'm speaking about, we of course need to cover the base kit first because this is a brand new Warframe, and then after we're done talking about the skills, we'll cover a selection of builds and ways to mod and use different arcanes, because to be honest, the possibilities are kind of endless with this Warframe. Starting with Oraxia's passive, when you wall latch with her, you'll gain invisibility for 8 seconds. And yes, this is recastable whilst it's active, so if you want to engage to a different wall latch whilst you're still invisible, you can recast the invis. This becomes even more effective when you combine it with her ultimate, but at baseline, this is mainly useful for using certain arcanes such as Arcane Crepuscular to get bonus crit damage and power strength, or going with something like Arcane Arachne for more damage whilst you're wall latching. The first ability is Mercy's Kiss, a single target pounce that does toxin damage. Not only does this have a very high chance to drop you both health and energy orbs, so this is your main sustain tool, but it also has an instant kill threshold. When enemies are at the roughly 50% HP threshold, sometimes this is increased or decreased depending on, I think it's impact procs, they'll have a marker above their head, and if you use this ability on the marked enemy, it is a guaranteed insta-kill. This may not seem too useful at first, and in the chaos of Warframe where we're already doing a lot of quick AoE damage, it can be hard to sometimes catch enemies with this mark on their head, but this is an incredible sustain tool and is also really good when taken into Warframe 1999 and fighting tech rot targets with damage attenuation. This can easily half the amount of time you spend on one of those tougher targets. The second skill, Webbed Embrace, isn't too complicated. The best thing you could probably compare this to is Caliban's second skill. She'll throw out spider webs that spread across the ground. These will hold enemies in place unless they of course have overguard such as an Eximus unit, and also make them increasingly vulnerable to damage, so it's just an AoE debuff with CC built in. This may seem basic and like a subsumable option, but I actually think it is a very valid and important part of her kit because it increases the overall DPS of her other skills, which is important. Speaking of her other skills that synergize really well with that, we've got to move on to her third skill, which is Widow's Brood. This is her summoner skill. You'll send out a bunch of toxic projectiles. These do pretty good damage overall, and whenever you kill an enemy that's been struck by this, they'll spawn in a scuttler, basically a mini spider to fight alongside you. You can spawn up to 10 total of these spiders, and if we're talking damage, there is ways to make these do pretty good DPS overall. They aren't necessarily going to keep up with how strong we can make our companions nowadays, but we've got some builds and synergies which can amplify these today, and the rate in which they apply toxin to the battlefield is actually way more useful than I thought they were going to be. And although you can also subsume these off, I probably wouldn't recommend it either. They're an extremely good DPS tool overall as well. Then moving on to her fourth and final ability, which ironically is probably the only skill in her kit that I wouldn't recommend subsuming off. Other than that, her first 3 skills are all options to be subsumed off. Once again, another element of why she's so versatile to mod. Her fourth skill, Silk Stride, allows her to spawn in 4 total spider legs that she can walk around on. You become immune to status effects, including knockdowns, and gain a massive increase to your maximum HP. You can't use melee whilst this is active, but your guns are imbued with toxin damage, and when you kill enemies with this toxin on your weapons, it will cause them to explode in a toxin explosion. In addition to this, when you're using your fourth skill, you have a synergy with your passive. Using either your dodge, melee, or your sprint where you're aiming, you will Spider-Man thwip yourself to whether you're aiming, and it will latch you onto the wall without you having to hold down aim on a regular wall latch. You can basically Spider-Man thwip yourself around to different walls. It's a very efficient way of making use of your passive and staying invisible, and of course using something like Arcane Crepuscular. And do not sleep on the mobility aspect of this tool, it's actually really fucking fast. So now that we've covered her kit, what kind of playstyle can we even go for on this Warframe, because we've got a multitude of different avenues we could take. I'm first off going to cover her base kit and a build that I would use for just regular use, I guess. And the focus of this build, it can be versatile, but it's mainly catered towards the synergy of your passive and your ult with that invis. The idea being that every 8 or 10 seconds or so, you can be lenient. You'll be in your ult, spreading your spiders with your 3, debuffing with your 2, and dashing from wall to wall, retaining that invisibility, making use of Arcane Arcane Crepuscular, and Arcane Arachne. And what's great is even if you don't build for this invis, because the duration isn't going to affect the duration of your passive, but if you're building for a HP setup, which we'll get onto soon, you can always go to a wall latch and survive on the wall. So let's say your HP starts to fall off a higher level, you can mid-mission adapt to a level cap version of the setup simply by adjusting your playstyle and just wall latching instead and being invisible. Once again, another reason why she's so versatile. Before I show off the base setup, I'm going to address my Archon Shards because these are really important, but they're not mandatory. First off, I've gone with a Talforge green Archon Shard for more corrosive stacks. The reason being that because her kit is mainly focused around Toxin, we're obviously going to use Archon Continuity. This is a must-have mod on this Warframe in my opinion, so increasing our overall corrosive stacks is going to increase our armor strip and overall DPS. I've gone with 2 casting speed shards. This is personal preference, mainly for my 3rd skill because I do like using it and spamming it. Her casting speed isn't bad at all, so these aren't necessary, it's just a personal choice. And then the reason for having 2 equilibrium shards, this is so I don't have to use the equilibrium mod on the build, that way it sort of frees up a mod slot. But before I had these installed, I was just using equilibrium and prime flow and sacrificing I think a little bit of power strength compared to what these shards allow me to mod for. So once again, not necessary, but it just frees up a mod slot in my build. You could also keep equilibrium on your setup and instead mod for energy max with blue shards. So here is the base setup focusing on her invis aspect. Archon Continuity is going to be on every single one of these builds, and because I'm not focusing on health tanking, I'm not using adaptation or any health mods, so I'm compensating a bit of duration with Augur Message, so that way I get overall more duration on my skills. I can also fit in more range with Augur Reach. Summoner's Wrath is very optional in here because we're not entirely focused on our scuttlers, but the main focus of this setup is of course the Arcanes. Arcane Arachne, it's in the name, this is basically meant for her. More damage when you're wall latching, and then of course Arcane Crepuscular, blatantly obvious, we're using this for crit damage and more power strength, because we're going to be invisible a lot of the time. This is my build for her regular kit with no subsume. There is another build in this video with no subsume as well, but if you guys like the wall latching playstyle, this is a build I recommend you try. The next build we're covering also doesn't have a subsume, but it's a complete switch up in the playstyle. Instead of focusing on the invis aspect, going straight for the 4th ability, the health tanking, status immunity, and just being a giant terrifying spider Warframe marching through the battlefield. This may be my favourite setup right now just from a playstyle standpoint, which I wasn't really expecting. And what I'm starting to realise is Oraxia is kind of a mix between Inaros, Loki, and probably Caliban. She's got the summoner damage of Caliban and also the energy sustain similar to his first skill, the corrosive damage and the health tanking and the summons of Inaros, as well as the invis and wall latching aspects of Loki. And to be honest, I just think Oraxia is like Inaros, but good. The build is admittedly a bit over the top. We're focusing all on getting as much health maximum for my 4th skill as possible, so we're focusing on power strength. But because of this power strength dump, we're also benefiting the hell out of the rest of our abilities. I'm also keeping on the 1st skill here as well. I will say this is the one I prefer to subsume off most of the time, just because I don't love how sometimes it's a bit difficult to see enemies that are marked, but when you're fighting enemies with damage attenuation, it is pretty damn useful. We can get easily over 10k health with this setup. We're going to be tanky across most of the content, and if you ever start taking too much damage, maybe you're on an endless run, just start wall latching and you're going to be invisible. I cannot drive this home enough. This Warframe is so perfect for any type of mission when shit gets out of hand. She can just adapt on the fly. So for the Oraxia setup, we're dropping a little bit of power range, a little bit of duration, but going full power strength and then throwing on Archon Vitality, and then throwing on Umbral Vitality with adaptation, Precision Intensify because we can fit it in and it's going to directly affect our 4th skill, Arcane Blessing for even max HP, and Arcane Grace is really good in here so you can sustain yourself way more frequently without having to mash your 1st skill for those equilibrium orbs. I know what you're thinking, whereas Arcane Bellicose? Don't get me wrong, it has its place in the build, but I don't really think it needs to be in here. We've already got so much power strength anyway, but if you want, you can throw it in instead of Arcane Grace for more power strength. Summoner's Wrath is also optional here because it isn't the focus to make our 3rd skill the best. Growing Power is what I was using in the footage, I believe. But yeah, the Oraxia setup is currently my favourite to use. Okay, before I disappoint you guys by talking about Nourish, I'm going to talk about going for a full summoner build. I'm sure like many players, my first instinct was to try Desiccation with its augment so I can have a bunch of sandcats running around with my spiders and my companion. I did try this. It is hilarious and it can kill a lot of enemies very quickly, but it's more of just a meme build, and to be honest, getting those guaranteed finishes off of enemies, especially when Xmas are rolling up, is a pain in the arse, and the overall survivability and sustain of this isn't going to be as effective unless you get rid of your 2nd skill, which I don't like doing because I like the debuff. So I got rid of the Desiccation build and started thinking, what's a different way to sort of amplify my spiders. There's a number of ways you could go around it, but I've chosen Tesla Nervos. Tesla Bank allows you to spread the damage done to enemies that are caught by your Nervos. So let's say it's shocking a specific enemy and a spider is attacking them, that damage is going to spread to nearby enemies, and the skill scales particularly well against enemies with no armor, which we're going to be doing a lot of armor stripping because of both Archon continuity combined with our Toxin and our Archon Shard. This isn't going to nuke rooms or anything, but the overall DPS of our spiders is vastly increased by the synergy. And sure, you can use Archon stretch because of the electricity, but remember you're not going to gain a load of energy from this because you're pretty much in your 4th skill the whole time, meaning that you're draining energy and won't be able to gain from said mod. Anyway, this build is actually incredibly fun and is my personal way to go around modding the shit out of your spiders. As you can see, there's a few differences with this setup. We've got more power range with Cunning Drift and Archon Stretch, Fleeting Expertise and Arcane Energize. This is so I can spam my Tesla Nervos and my 3rd skill. This build will probably have energy issues if you don't have Arcane Energize, which is a problem. Because of the high price of you needing Energize, you might want to adjust your Archon Shards. It's just this Arcane is going to make this build way more costly, but it is really useful. Camisada is going to give us more power, strength and speed on our Scuttlers, and that reminder is really good on here so we don't have to constantly recast our Tesla Nervos, they're just going to roll around, and Adaptation is mostly covering our survivability with our 4. So yeah, you can try the Sandcat setup with Desiccation's Curse, but just be aware it's very clunky to do. In my personal experience, it was more of an annoyance and a disappointment. The Tesla Nervos gave me what I wanted for a summoner build. And finally, we've got to talk about Nourish. It's corny, right? Because I threw this on straight away thinking, okay, this is a no-brainer. I can give my spiders viral damage, I can do viral at the same time as my Toxin and Corrosive. It's a match made in heaven, and I can get rid of my 1st skill and just have constant energy regen. And particularly because we mod for a lot of power strength on Oraxia, the energy return from Nourish is going to be huge. And I can't lie, this is a perfect subsume on this Warframe. What Nourish is really doing is allowing me to have a perfect hybrid setup. I can have good survivability, gun rush around, do Toxin, viral and corrosive at the same time, as well as buffing my Scuttlers. It's just a versatile build, and it's really easy to play, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm special and not use it. It's really good on Oraxia, man. And keeping in the theme of being a versatile build, we're also using sort of a crisscross of arcanes from builds. We got Arcane Camisado and Arcane Crepuscular. The moment my survivability starts to fall off, which admittedly is pretty late into the game, I can just wall Latch and make use of Arcane Crepuscular. Augur Message is here to alleviate some of the duration loss from Transient Fortitude to help with my Nourish, and maxing the shit out of our strength is really important here, primarily because the amount of energy you can get from her 1st skill is arguably way better and more consistent than Nourish. But if you pump Nourish full of strength, the energy return you get is enough to sustain you even with negative efficiency. So yes, once again, Nourish doesn't fucking miss, who would have thought? As I said, my favourite playstyle right now is the full-on health tank build. In terms of how you play this frame, she has a very active playstyle. You're going to keep your 4 on pretty much at all times, putting your 2 in areas of the map where enemies may funnel into, mashing your 3 on a regular basis to keep enemies procced with Toxin, and then you kill them and they'll spawn in spiders, and just paying attention to see where marked enemies are, and then you can mark them, get an insta-kill and all of your health and energy back with your 1st ability. And once you start taking too much damage, you can simply use your 4 and then sprint or dodge onto a wall, and then you'll thwip to it with your spider webs, and then you're just going to be invisible, and you can easily take this to whatever level of enemies you're trying to go to without sacrificing anything in your build. Just goes to show how good her passive is. Anyway, as she stands right now, I'm definitely going to be playing this Warframe a lot in the future. I think she's really fun. That's usually the case with new Warframe releases, but I think this one's going to last a while. And all I'm saying is they did this whole best friend thing between Warframes that are opposites in the past with Gorse and Grendel, the Speedster and then the Eater. I've talked about how I really want a Scorpion Warframe before. Why not do either a best friend or a brother or a sister as a Scorpion frame in the future? I would absolutely love to see that. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, feel free to like and sub. If not, then no worries. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.